I'm Caroline Lawrence, 27 years old, and I come from a family where being born second meant being born invisible. Our prestigious Boston legacy stretches back generations, but so does our disturbing tradition of favoring the firstborn. Recently, I found myself homeless despite my family's millions, all because I wasn't firstborn. Changing my last name wasn't just paperwork, it was reclaiming my existence. That Thanksgiving confrontation changed everything. Before I share how I went from sleeping in my car to winning a journalism award, where are you watching from? If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, subscribe now and join me on this journey of reclaiming identity. The Lawrence name carries weight in Boston's elite circles. Our family fortune began with my grandfather, who built a thriving investment firm that now manages billions. From outside, people envied our sprawling Beacon Hill mansion, the summer home in Martha's Vineyard, and our luxury vehicles. What they couldn't see was the toxic tradition that poisoned our family for generations. From my earliest memories, I understood that my older sister Amanda was special. At 5 years old, I didn't understand the concept of primogeniture, but I felt its effects daily. Our parents explained it as family tradition. When I questioned why Amanda, 5 years my senior, received elaborate gifts, while mine were practical afterthoughts. The Lawrence family wealth stays intact by passing to the firstborn. My father would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. This tradition has kept us prosperous for generations. At birthdays, Christmas, or any celebration, the pattern was painfully predictable. Amanda's 13th birthday featured a private yacht party with 30 guests and a diamond necklace. My 13th birthday was a small dinner with family and a practical laptop for schoolwork. I pretended gratitude while swallowing disappointment. Our home reflected this imbalance. Amanda's bedroom was a spacious suite with a private bathroom and sitting area. My room, while comfortable by normal standards, was notably smaller and overlooked the driveway rather than the garden. These physical arrangements reinforced the message she was the Lawrence heir. I was the spare. My mother's favoritism manifested in subtle ways. She'd call Amanda first with family news plan meals around Amanda's preferences and schedule family events to accommodate Amanda's calendar. My father didn't bother with subtlety. He spent weekends mentoring Amanda on investment strategies and business ethics, preparing her to take over the family firm. When I asked to join these sessions, he patted my head and said, "These matters won't concern you, Caroline. Focus on finding a good husband instead." I learned that this tradition extended beyond our immediate family. My father's younger brother, Uncle Thomas, had been treated similarly. He eventually moved across the country to Seattle, rarely contacting the family. When mentioned, it was always with disapproval. Thomas never understood family responsibility. I now recognize he was escaping the same toxic pattern that was suffocating me. Academic excellence became my refuge. If I couldn't earn their love through birth order, perhaps achievement would win their approval. I maintained a perfect GPA, captained the debate team, edited the school newspaper, and volunteered extensively. My parents acknowledged these accomplishments with tepid praise, always followed by news of Amanda's latest triumph at the family firm. The only family member who truly saw me was my grandmother, Martha. During private moments when she visited, she'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "This tradition is medieval nonsense, Caroline. Your worth isn't determined by birth order." These rare moments of validation sustained me through years of emotional neglect. Grandmother Martha secretly supported my interests in ways my parents never did. She slipped me books on journalism when I expressed interest in writing, attended my debate competitions when my parents were busy with Amanda's business functions, and told me stories of strong women who forged their own paths. "Your grandfather didn't approve of my volunteer work," she confided once. "He thought it distracted from my duties as a Lawrence wife. I did it anyway, and founded that literacy program that's still running today. Sometimes you have to disappoint family to become yourself." Those words would eventually become my life philosophy, though the path to embracing them would prove more difficult than I could have imagined. My acceptance letter to Columbia University's journalism program arrived during my senior year of high school. The prestigious program only accepted 30 students annually, and my application portfolio of published articles and recommendations from journalism mentors had secured my spot. I raced home, letter clutched in my hand, heart pounding with excitement. This was my chance to prove my worth, to carve my own path. My parents were in the living room discussing Amanda's recent promotion to junior partner at Lawrence Investments. "I got into Columbia's journalism program," I announced breathlessly. My father glanced up from his newspaper. "That's nice, Caroline. What's the tuition? Not congratulations, not pride, just the cost assessment. They offer scholarships. I began, but my mother interrupted. We'll pay for it, she said dismissively. It's only fair since we paid for Amanda's Wharton MBA. My father frowned. Journalism isn't exactly a profitable field, Caroline. Amanda was making 6 figures right out of business school. This is my dream, I said firmly. And Columbia is the best. We'll support you, my father sighed. But remember, this is charity, not investment. The family money will stay with the Lawrence Investments line. Even in this moment of achievement, they couldn't resist reminding me of my secondary status. But I was too excited about Columbia to let their attitudes diminish my joy. This was my ticket to independence. Moving to New York was liberating. For the first time, I wasn't Amanda's little sister or the second Lawrence daughter. I was just Caroline, journalism student with promise. The cramped dorm room I shared with a dance major named Jasmine felt more like home than our Boston mansion ever had. Jasmine became my first real friend. She introduced me to Diego, a film student, and Taylor, who studied comparative literature. None of them came from wealth or cared about my family name. We spent evenings in cheap diners discussing art politics and our dreams over endless cups of coffee. These conversations nourished my soul in ways family dinners never had. Professor Wilson's advanced investigative journalism class changed my life. A former Washington Post reporter with 2 Pulitzer Prizes, she pushed us beyond our limits. After tearing apart my first assignment, she kept me after class. You write with precision and insight, she said. But you're holding something back. The best journalists bring their whole selves to their work. I was taught that personal feelings don't belong in professional settings. I explained, echoing my father's mantra. Nonsense, she scoffed. Your perspective is your strength. Find stories that matter to you and tell them with your whole heart. Under her mentorship, I flourished. My article exposing the university's investment in companies with human rights violations won the school's journalism prize and was republished in several national outlets. Professor Wilson began introducing me to her media contacts, opening doors I hadn't known existed. Meanwhile, Grandmother Martha secretly supported my independence. Monthly envelopes arrived containing cash and encouraging notes. For books and experiences that will make you a better writer, or treat yourself to something that brings you joy. These funds allowed me small comforts my strict budget wouldn't otherwise permit. Back in Boston, Amanda was advancing rapidly at Lawrence Investments. My parents' phone calls centered around her accomplishments with cursory questions about my studies. I began limiting these conversations to preserve my growing sense of self-worth. During my junior year, I landed a coveted internship at the New York Times. The competitive position typically went to graduate students, but my portfolio had impressed the selection committee. I called my parents, hoping finally to have earned their approval. That's nice, dear, my mother said. Did you hear Amanda closed the Peterson account $15 million under management now? I stopped seeking their validation after that call. By senior year, I had built a solid foundation for my career. My byline appeared regularly in the university paper and occasionally in larger publications. Professor Wilson introduced me to Elizabeth Donovan, an editor at the New York Times, who mentioned potential openings after graduation. Your investigative instincts are exceptional, she told me after reading my thesis project on wealth inequality. We need voices like yours in journalism. For the first time, I envisioned a future where I could succeed on my own terms. The Lawrence name and traditions might never embrace me, but I was creating an identity beyond them. My graduation approached with a mixture of pride in my accomplishments and anxiety about the next chapter. I couldn't have known how dramatically that chapter would unfold, or how completely the foundations of my life were about to collapse. Graduation day arrived bright and clear. As I donned my cap and gown, I felt a surging pride in my accomplishments. 4 years of relentless work had culminated in a summa cum laude degree and a job offer from the New York Times. For once, I wasn't standing in Amanda's shadow. The ceremony passed in a blur of speeches and cheering. I searched the crowd for my family, spotting only Grandmother Martha's silver hair. My parents had sent a brief text that morning. Amanda's closing the Singapore merger today. Can't make it. Good luck. Not even my graduation warranted priority over Amanda's work. Grandmother Martha hugged me fiercely after the ceremony. I'm so proud of you, my darling. You've built this success entirely on your own merit. Her presence meant everything, though I couldn't help noticing how frail she'd become. At 78, her once sturdy frame had diminished, and she leaned heavily on a cane. I've got something for you, she whispered, pressing a small velvet box into my palm. Inside lay a vintage sapphire pendant on a delicate silver chain. This was my mother's and her mother's before that. It should go to a woman who forges her own path. Tears sprang to my eyes as she fastened it around my neck. The second-born women in this family have always been the strongest, she murmured. Remember that. 2 weeks later, I began at the New York Times. My tiny apartment in Washington Heights stretched my entry-level salary to its limit, but I was determined to make it work. My roommate Susan, a paralegal at a non-profit, became another ally in my growing chosen family. Each morning I pinned my press badge with fierce pride. I started in the city desk covering local stories that wouldn't make national headlines, but taught me the fundamentals of daily journalism. My editors praised my attention to detail and commitment to factual accuracy. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely valued. 3 months into my new life, the call came. Grandmother Martha had suffered a massive stroke. By the time I reached Boston, she was gone. The funeral was a somber affair filled with Boston's elite, most of whom spoke of Martha's charitable work and community leadership. I stood apart clutching the sapphire pendant and mourning the only person who had truly championed my existence. My father approached after the service. The reading of the will is scheduled for next month. Mother's affairs were quite complex. I don't care about the will, I said honestly. I just miss her. He looked at me strangely. She spoke of you often in her final years. This revelation surprised me. Grandmother Martha and I had maintained our close relationship largely out of my parents' view. I hadn't realized she'd advocated for me in my absence. 2 months passed before the family gathered in the mahogany-paneled office of Warren Blackwell, the Lawrence family attorney for 30 years. His expression was grave as he adjusted his spectacles. Martha Lawrence's last will and testament, updated and notarized 1 week before her passing, directs the distribution of her estate as follows. I listened with increasing confusion as he outlined that the entirety of Grandmother's considerable personal fortune, separate from the family business, would go to Amanda with a token sum of $5,000 allocated to me. This contradicted everything Grandmother had ever expressed about her wishes. There must be some mistake, I interrupted. Grandmother always said she wanted to divide her estate equally. The attorney cleared his throat uncomfortably. The final will is quite clear, Ms. Lawrence. Something felt wrong. Grandmother Martha had been hospitalized for weeks before her death. When would she have updated her will? I asked to see the document, scanning the signature page carefully. The notary stamp caught my attention, specifically its positioning relative to Grandmother's shaky signature. During my investigative journalism courses, Professor Wilson had taught us about document authentication. This signature page showed subtle signs of tampering. When exactly was this will signed? I asked sharply. July 15th, the attorney replied. That's impossible, I said. Grandmother was in intensive care that entire week. She couldn't even hold a pen. The room fell silent. My father's face hardened. Amanda studied her manicured nails. My mother suddenly became intensely interested in her handbag. May I have a copy of this document, Ikes? I asked. I'm afraid that's not possible until probate is complete, the attorney replied too quickly. Later that evening, I confronted my father in his study. You forged Grandmother's will, didn't you? His expression remained impassive. We simply ensured the family wealth remains properly consolidated. Mother was sentimental about you, but sentimentality doesn't build financial dynasties. You stole what she wanted to give me, I said, voice shaking with rage and disbelief. Nothing was stolen from you, Caroline. You can't lose what was never yours to begin with. The Lawrence fortune follows the firstborn line. It always has. This wasn't the family fortune. This was Grandmother's personal money to distribute as she wished. And we adjusted her wishes for the greater good of the family legacy, he replied coldly. Amanda has responsibilities to the Lawrence name that you don't. I turned to Amanda, who had silently entered the room. Did you know about this? Her momentary hesitation told me everything. It's complicated, Caroline. The family has certain traditions. Traditions of theft and forgery, I spat. That's enough, my mother interjected. Amanda has been groomed since childhood to manage the Lawrence holdings. She needs these resources to fulfill her duties. What would you do with that kind of money fund some idealistic journalism project? The family name requires proper stewardship. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not just the money, though, that represented freedom and options, but the calculated erasure of Grandmother Martha's final wishes. They had literally rewritten her legacy to exclude me. Returning to New York, I spiraled into depression. The betrayal consumed my thoughts, affecting my sleep and concentration. My work began to suffer. Deadlines slipped. Fact-checking errors crept into my articles. My editor issued warnings that I barely registered through the fog of betrayal. "Your last 3 pieces have required extensive revisions," she noted during my performance review. "This isn't the quality we expect from New York Times journalists." In turn, I promised improvement but couldn't deliver. The foundation of my identity had cracked, and I was falling through the fissures. 2 weeks later, I received termination papers. My journalism career, like my place in the Lawrence family, had been erased. The eviction notice appeared on my apartment door 3 weeks after losing my job. Without my income, Susan couldn't cover our entire rent, and her non-profit salary barely supported her own expenses. The meagre severance package from the Times had already gone toward past due bills. Panic seized me as I calculated my dwindling resources. In desperation, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. My father answered on the 4th ring. "I've lost my job and apartment." I explained each word painful to utter. "I need help just temporarily until I find another position." His response was immediate and cold. "Perhaps this is a blessing in disguise. Come home where you belong. We can find you a suitable position at Lawrence Investments, something administrative perhaps. Amanda needs a reliable assistant." The offer stung worse than an outright refusal. They weren't offering help, they were offering surrender. Return home, accept your inferior position, serve the firstborn as you were always meant to do. The subtext was clear: journalism had failed you just as we predicted. "I'm not asking to come home," I clarified. "I'm asking for a loan to keep my apartment while I job hunt." "We don't believe that would be productive," my mother interjected, apparently listening on another extension. "You've had your adventure in New York. It's time to accept your place in the family structure." "My place?" I echoed incredulously. "Yes, Caroline. We all have roles to play. Amanda preserves and grows the Lawrence legacy. Your role is to support that mission in whatever capacity serves the family best." I ended the call shaking with rage and helplessness. They would rather see me homeless than independent. The Lawrence family tradition wasn't just about favouring firstborns. It was about subjugating secondborns. When moving day came, Jasmine from college offered her sofa for a week or 2, while I figured things out. I stored what little furniture I owned in Susan's parents' garage and piled essential belongings into my 10-year-old Honda Civic, a graduation gift from grandmother Martha, that now served as both transportation and potential shelter. Jasmine's generosity quickly strained under real-world pressures. Her studio apartment wasn't designed for 2 adults, and her boyfriend's increasing overnight stays created uncomfortable tension. After 11 days, I volunteered to try other arrangements, though none existed. That first night in my car parked in a well-lit lot behind a 24-hour grocery store, reality crashed upon me. I, Caroline Lawrence, descendant of Boston aristocracy, was homeless. I arranged blankets across the reclined driver's seat, trying to create some semblance of comfort while keeping an alert eye on my surroundings. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by passing cars and my own anxieties. Morning brought new indignities. I used the grocery store bathroom to brush my teeth and wash my face, carefully avoiding employee attention. My membership at a national gym chain provided shower access, and I developed a routine of arriving early before the morning crowd to maintain basic hygiene without arousing suspicion. Days blurred together. I applied for every journalism position I could find, plus administrative roles, retail jobs, anything that might provide income. Responses were scarce, and those that came requested in-person interviews, for which I had to carefully prepare in public restrooms, changing clothes and applying makeup in cramped stalls. My dwindling funds forced impossible choices between gas, food, and phone service. I needed my phone for job applications and my car for shelter, so meals became increasingly sparse. Weight dropped from my already slim frame. Dark circles became permanent fixtures beneath my eyes. 2 weeks into homelessness, disaster struck. A heavy rainstorm flooded the parking lot where I'd been sleeping. I moved the car to higher ground, but not before soaking my shoes in blankets. With nowhere to dry them, I spent that night shivering in damp bedding. By morning, a parking enforcement officer had ticketed my vehicle. When I returned from a job interview the following afternoon, the car had been towed. The impound fee exceeded my remaining funds. Without transportation or shelter, I faced the prospect of actual street homelessness. That night, I reluctantly entered a women's shelter, the ultimate juxtaposition to my privileged upbringing. The Lawrence daughter, heir to generations of wealth, now slept on a narrow cot surrounded by strangers whose life circumstances had led them to the same desperate place. In the shelter's harsh fluorescent lighting, I confronted the reality of how far I had fallen. The worn blanket communal bathrooms and atmosphere of quiet desperation contrasted sharply with the Egyptian cotton sheets and marble bathrooms of my childhood home. Yet here, at least, I wasn't judged by birth order or family legacy. The shelter staff treated everyone with the same efficient compassion, and the women sharing this space understood struggle in ways my family never would. That night, staring at the ceiling, while unfamiliar sounds echoed around me, I reached the absolute bottom of my life's trajectory. The Lawrence name, which had opened doors throughout Boston society, meant nothing here. I was simply another woman without resources, another statistic in America's housing crisis. The irony was both bitter and clarifying. I had more in common with these strangers than with my own blood relatives. Dawn broke through dusty windows as I lay awake on the shelter cot. Women around me stirred, preparing for another day of survival. As sunlight gradually illuminated the sparse room, something shifted inside me. Rock bottom offered an unexpected gift. There was nowhere to go but up and no one to rely on but myself. I walked to the nearest public library when it opened, claimed a quiet corner, and began researching. Not jobs this time, but something more fundamental: legal name changes. The Lawrence name had been both my privilege and my prison. It connected me to wealth I couldn't access and expectations I couldn't fulfill. What if I simply wasn't a Lawrence anymore? The process seemed straightforward, though, not immediate. File a petition, pay fees, publish a notice, attend a court hearing. The cost totaled nearly $200, a fortune in my current state, but not impossible. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of purpose. My next search focused on legal aid resources. The library's reference librarian directed me to a pro bono legal clinic that operated Tuesday afternoons. I marked my calendar and continued research, discovering that Grandmother Martha's altered will might constitute fraud. The statute of limitations gave me time to build a case once I stabilized my immediate situation. Leaving the library, I spotted a barista's wanted sign in a cafe window. With nothing to lose, I walked in and applied. The manager, a woman named Renee, with kind eyes and brisk efficiency, interviewed me on the spot. "You're overqualified," she noted, reviewing my resume. "I'm also currently homeless," I replied honestly. "I need steady work while I rebuild." Her expression softened. "Been there myself once. Morning shift starts at 5:30 a.m. Can you handle that?" The cafe job provided minimum wage plus tips enough for immediate necessities. I found a room for rent in a shared house in Brooklyn, tiny and in need of repairs but private and safe. My housemates included a nursing student, a musician, and an elderly retired teacher. None questioned my downward mobility. Each had their own complicated story. With shelter secured, I pursued additional income streams. Morning shifts at the cafe, afternoon dog walking for neighborhood professionals, and weekend delivery driving stretched my days from 5 a.m. until midnight. Every spare dollar went into my rebirth fund for legal fees and eventual action against my family. During this period, I maintained meticulous journals documenting my family history and the will manipulation. These weren't just therapeutic, they were evidence. The investigative journalist in me recognized the importance of contemporaneous documentation. I recorded dates, conversations, and supporting details that might strengthen a future legal case. After 3 weeks of punishing work schedules, I had saved enough to begin my name change process. I needed something meaningful yet distinct from Lawrence. While shelving books during a volunteer shift at the library, I spotted The Griffin's Journey, my favorite childhood book about a mythical creature finding its true home. Griffin. Caroline Griffin. It felt right, strong, distinctive, yet personal. Filing the name change petition represented my first concrete step toward reclaiming my identity. The court clerk processed my paperwork with bored efficiency, unaware of its profound significance. Walking from the courthouse, I felt lighter, as if the Lawrence burden had already begun lifting from my shoulders. That evening, I sent an email to Professor Wilson updating her on my situation. Her response came within hours, expressing outrage at my family's behavior and offering a position as her teaching assistant for the upcoming semester. The role included a small stipend and access to university resources, a lifeline I hadn't dared hope for. "Your investigative instincts were always exceptional," she wrote. "Perhaps it's time to investigate the system that allowed your family's behavior. There's a story here bigger than personal betrayal. Her words sparked an idea. I began an anonymous blog titled Secondborn, chronicling my experiences within a wealth-hoarding family. Using pseudonyms and altered details, I documented the psychological impact of institutionalized favoritism and the legal mechanisms that protected generational wealth inequality. To my surprise, the blog gained immediate traction. Comments poured in from people sharing similar experiences across different cultural backgrounds. What I'd thought was a Lawrence family aberration appeared to be a widespread phenomenon. Readers from wealthy Indian, Nigerian, British, and Chinese families describe parallel traditions favoring firstborn children, particularly sons. 6 weeks after launching the blog, I received an email from Jackson Morris, editor of an online publication focused on economic justice. He offered to publish an expanded version of my posts as a feature series with actual compensation. For the first time since losing my Times position, my journalism skills were again valued. My legal name change hearing approached as these opportunities unfolded. Standing before the judge, I stated my reasons simply. I'm establishing my independent identity separate from family constraints. He granted the petition without comment, unaware of its monumental significance in my life. Caroline Griffin walked out of that courtroom with paperwork that would soon make my transformation official. The woman who entered had been defined by what she wasn't, not the firstborn, not the heir, not Lawrence enough. The woman who emerged was defined solely by who she chose to be. That evening, I celebrated alone in my tiny room, splurging on takeout and a bottle of inexpensive wine. As I raised a glass to my reflection, I made a silent promise to Grandmother Martha her true wishes would eventually be honoured and the Lawrence family tradition would face its reckoning. 6 months after becoming Caroline Griffin, legally, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have predicted. My feature series on inheritance inequality had resonated deeply with readers, leading to a regular column at Progressive Economics Review. Professor Wilson's teaching assistant position had evolved into guest lecturer opportunities. My anonymous blog had attracted over 50,000 followers. Financially, I remained far from wealthy, but stability had returned. My Brooklyn room had become a home decorated with second-hand treasures and filled with books. My housemates had become friends, creating a chosen family that supported each other through life's challenges. My journalism now focused on exposing systems that perpetuated inequality, particularly within supposedly meritocratic institutions. Each article sharpened my skills for the eventual confrontation I knew awaited me. I was building ammunition one byline at a time. The break came unexpectedly. A reader comment on my blog mentioned a similar will controversy involving a prominent Boston family, not Lawrence, but Harrington. Research revealed striking parallels to my grandmother's situation, down to the same notary stamp. This couldn't be coincidence. Further investigation uncovered multiple cases where wealthy Boston families had adjusted inheritance documents to favor firstborns, all processed through Warren Blackwell's law firm. The pattern suggested not isolated incidents, but a systematic practice. I reached out to Uncle Thomas, my father's estranged brother, finding him in Seattle, where he ran a successful architectural firm. His initial response was hesitant. Decades of Lawrence family conditioning had taught him caution, but eventually he agreed to meet when I visited Seattle for a journalism conference. Thomas Lawrence had my father's height and jawline, but his eyes held a warmth my father's never showed. Over dinner, he shared his own Lawrence family exile story. Your grandfather threatened to disinherit me completely if I pursued architecture instead of finance, he explained. When I refused to comply, he systematically undermined my relationships with family members, describing me as ungrateful and irresponsible. That sounds familiar, I said. The night before I left Boston, I overheard him discussing changes to my mother's will with their attorney. She had planned to split her estate between her sons, but suddenly everything went to your father. Were you able to challenge it? I asked. Thomas shook his head. I tried, but without evidence, it was my word against the documents. The experience nearly destroyed me. I considered suicide during that period, seeing no way forward. His revelation chilled me. The Lawrence family tradition hadn't merely denied opportunities, it had nearly cost lives. What saved you? I asked softly. Meeting Julia, my wife. She helped me see that I could build a life of my own design separate from the Lawrence legacy. We've raised 3 children with equal love and opportunity. All are thriving in different fields. By evening's end, Thomas had agreed to provide a sworn statement about his experiences, potentially crucial support for challenging Grandmother Martha's altered will. Returning to New York, I consulted with a legal clinic specializing in estate fraud. The attorney reviewed my documentation with increasing interest. This pattern of forgery and notary irregularities constitutes serious fraud, she explained. The statute of limitations hasn't expired. With your uncle's testimony and these document inconsistencies, you have grounds for a case. Would it be worth pursuing? So I asked. Financially, perhaps. But these cases often settle quietly to avoid publicity. The real question is whether justice matters more to you than closure. As I weighed my options, the annual Lawrence family Thanksgiving gathering approached. I hadn't attended since before grandmother's death, but an email from my mother arrived. Annual Thanksgiving dinner, November 26th, 5 p.m. Family tradition expects your attendance. Not an invitation, an expectation. The wording perfectly encapsulated the Lawrence dynamic. Yet something about this summons felt like opportunity rather than obligation. After consultation with my attorney, I made my decision. I would attend not as the prodigal second daughter returning to her assigned role, but as Caroline Griffin, journalist and advocate, ready to confront the system that had nearly destroyed me. Preparation consumed the weeks before Thanksgiving. I organized my evidence, rehearsed my statements, and fortified myself emotionally through sessions with Dr. Harper, the therapist who had supported me through my darkest days. I needed to be strategic, not reactive, when facing my family. The day arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully in a professional navy suit, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed revenge or victimhood. The sapphire pendant from grandmother Martha provided my only adornment, a silent testament to her true wishes. The Lawrence mansion looked unchanged as my taxi approached, imposing traditional radiating old money confidence. Distant relatives and business associates milled about the entrance hall, cocktails in hand. No one recognized me immediately. My absence, weight loss, and new confidence had transformed my appearance along with my name. Amanda spotted me first, her champagne glass freezing midway to her lips. I approached her, directly extending my hand professionally. "Hello, I'm Caroline Griffin. You must be Amanda Lawrence. Your family's approach to estate planning is quite fascinating from a journalistic perspective." Her face paled. "Caroline, what are you doing?" "Research for my latest series on inheritance inequality and potential estate fraud in prominent Boston families. This gathering provides excellent background." Word spread quickly through the party. My mother appeared, her socialite smile strained to breaking point. "Caroline, darling, what a surprise we'd heard you moved away." I did move, in several senses. I've established a new identity, a new career, and a new perspective on family dynamics. The strained chit-chat continued until dinner was announced. As guests moved toward the dining room, my father intercepted me, steering me forcefully toward his study. "What game are you playing, Sudge?" he demanded once the door closed. "No game, just truth. Something this family has historically struggled with. If you're here for money, I'm here for justice. For grandmother Martha, for Uncle Thomas, and for myself." "What does that mean?" His confident facade cracked slightly. I placed a manila folder on his desk. Evidence of multiple instances of will tampering, notary fraud, and inheritance manipulation, spanning 3 generations of Lawrence family history. Copies are with my attorney, a prominent news outlet, and the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. This last part was a bluff. The Attorney General hadn't yet received my documentation, but my father's reaction confirmed my suspicions. Real fear flashed across his face before his lawyer's training reasserted control. Ridiculous allegations. "No one will believe you over established Lawrence family documentation. Evidence speaks louder than reputation. The pattern is clear, the document irregularities are demonstrable, and witnesses are prepared to testify." Our standoff was interrupted by Amanda entering the study. "Dad, guests are asking for you. What's going on?" I turned to my sister. "I was just explaining how I've been investigating the family tradition of disinheriting secondborns through document manipulation, including grandmother Martha's will, that you benefited from." Amanda's composure crumbled. I didn't know they would forge anything, I just didn't question why she changed her mind so suddenly. Her inadvertent confession hung in the air between us. "Everyone to the dining room now," my father commanded. "We will discuss this privately later." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I think it's time the entire Lawrence family understood its true legacy." "Kasimasen." I walked directly to the dining room where 30 relatives and business associates awaited. Without preamble, I stepped to the head of the table. For those who don't know me, I'm Caroline Griffin, formerly Caroline Lawrence. I've spent the past year homeless, rebuilding my life and investigating this family's multi-generational practice of defrauding second-born children. The room fell silent as I methodically presented my evidence, culminating with Grandmother Martha's manipulated will. I explained how this tradition had driven Uncle Thomas to near suicide, left me homeless, despite family wealth, and potentially affected others in previous generations. This isn't about money, I concluded. It's about truth. The Lawrence legacy isn't business acumen or social standing, it's systematic erasure of second-born children who don't comply with their designated role. The silence following my presentation stretched uncomfortably until my father's oldest cousin Josephine stood up. "Thomas was always my favourite nephew," she said quietly. "We were told he abandoned the family. I never believed it." She turned to my father. "Edward, what have you done?" The unified Lawrence front, fractured as family members, began questioning the narrative they'd accepted for decades. Some expressed outrage, others disbelief. The family lawyer, hastily summoned, looked increasingly uncomfortable as specific document inconsistencies were identified. By evening's end, the annual Thanksgiving tradition had transformed into a family reckoning. I left without definitive resolution, but with the satisfaction of having exposed the truth. The Lawrence family would never operate quite the same way again. 3 months after the Thanksgiving confrontation, a settlement offer arrived through my attorney. The Lawrence family proposed restoring my portion of Grandmother Martha's estate with additional compensation for emotional distress. Via SAM, the agreement included a confidentiality clause, preventing public disclosure of specific allegations. After careful consideration and consultation with my legal team, I accepted with one modification: I would retain the right to discuss systemic inheritance, inequality without naming specific family members. This allowed me to continue my journalistic work while closing this painful chapter. The settlement provided financial security I hadn't expected to recover. My first action was donating 30% to organisations supporting homeless women, a gesture of gratitude for the shelter that had housed me at my lowest point. The remainder I invested conservatively, creating a foundation for future stability while continuing to live simply. The exposure of the will tampering triggered broader consequences. A state bar investigation into Warren Blackwell's practices uncovered multiple ethical violations. My father faced a professional censure for his role in document manipulation, though criminal charges were ultimately not filed. The Lawrence family's reputation suffered in Boston's elite circles, with several longtime business partners distancing themselves. Amanda reached out separately, requesting to meet at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between Boston and New York. She arrived looking less polished than I remembered, with shadows under her eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. "I'm not asking forgiveness," she began directly. "What happened to you was wrong, and I was complicit through silence." "Why did you never question it?" I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Fear, mostly. Dad made it clear that questioning family tradition was itself betrayal. But seeing you at Thanksgiving confident, accomplished, despite everything, made me realize how thoroughly I'd been controlled too, just with golden handcuffs instead of rejection. Our conversation continued for hours, uncomfortable but necessary. Amanda hadn't orchestrated my exclusion, but she had benefited from it without protest. Her awakening seemed genuine, though reconciliation would require time and concrete actions, not just words. "I've started therapy," she confided. "The therapist says our family system was fundamentally abusive to both of us, just in different ways. You were scapegoated. I was put on a pedestal with impossible expectations." "What about the company?" I asked. "I'm making changes. Instituting merit-based promotion policies, equalizing parental leave benefits, small steps toward breaking the favoritism cycle." We parted with tentative plans to meet again, neither fully reconciled nor completely estranged, a relationship in evolution rather than restoration. My professional life continued flourishing. The article series on inheritance inequality won the Garrison Prize for Economic Journalism, bringing national attention to systemic wealth hoarding practices. Progressive Economics Review offered me a permanent senior writer position, providing both stability and platform for continued advocacy. In therapy sessions with Dr. Harper, I processed the complex emotions surrounding my family reconciliation. "I don't want revenge anymore," I realized during one session. "I want reform for the Lawrence family and others like it." "That's the difference between healing and merely surviving," she noted. "You're channeling your experience toward meaningful change." This perspective guided my decision to maintain the Griffin name even after vindication. Caroline Lawrence had been defined by family position and limitation. Caroline Griffin represented self-determination and purpose. The name change that began as escape had become genuine identity. Using part of my settlement funds, I established the Second Child Scholarship at Columbia University, providing journalism education for students from families with rigid inheritance traditions. The first recipient, a young woman from a traditional Korean family, reminded me of my younger self determined to create her own path despite family pressure to support her older brother's career. My mother's journey toward understanding came more slowly than Amanda's. 6 months after Thanksgiving, she requested lunch during her New York visit for a charity board meeting. I always believed family traditions existed for good reasons, she explained hesitantly. Your grandfather was so insistent about preserving wealth through the firstborn line. Questioning it seemed unthinkable. Even when it hurt your daughter? I asked. She flinched. I failed you, Caroline. I prioritized family systems over your well-being. Seeing your success now achieved entirely without our support forces me to question everything we claim to value. Her apology wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. Our relationship would never recapture the simple trust of early childhood, but perhaps something more honest could emerge from its ashes. The most profound personal growth came through my chosen family. My housemates celebrated each of my victories as their own. Jasmine, Diego, and Taylor remained loyal friends, having supported me when biological family failed. Professor Wilson's mentorship evolved into collaborative professional relationship. These connections formed through authentic care, rather than obligation, taught me what family should actually provide acceptance, without conditioned support, without scorekeeping. As my platform grew, I received messages from second-born children worldwide facing similar dynamics. Their stories confirm that my experience, while painful, served a purpose by illuminating widespread injustice. Each article, interview, and speaking engagement expanded this impact, creating community among those previously isolated in their family position. I kept Grandmother Martha's sapphire pendant as my talisman through this journey. When weighing difficult decisions, I would touch it, asking myself what she would advise. The answer always pointed toward authenticity and courage, qualities she had recognized in me before I claimed them myself. 2 years after that transformative Thanksgiving, I published my memoir, Second-Born: Reclaiming Identity Beyond Family Hierarchy. The book balanced personal narrative with journalistic investigation into inheritance systems worldwide. Its success brought opportunities to advocate for legal reforms, protecting all children's interests in family estates. Throughout this journey, I've learned that liberation comes not from wealth or status, but from authentic identity. The Lawrence name once seemed the source of all opportunity. Losing it appeared to be catastrophic failure, yet that loss forced me to discover my intrinsic worth separate from family position or inheritance. If my story holds any wisdom, it's this: traditions deserve questioning, especially those that consistently benefit some family members at others' expense. Breaking cycles of favoritism requires courage to name injustice and determination to create new patterns. The hardest family conversations are often the most necessary ones. I sometimes wonder what Grandmother Martha would think of Caroline Griffin. I believe she would recognize her influence in my resilience and principles. The sapphire pendant now represents not what was taken from me, but what can never be stolen: the certainty of my own worth and the freedom to define my own legacy. Have you ever had to break from a family tradition to become your authentic self? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and renewal. Remember to like this video if you believe everyone deserves equal dignity, regardless of birth order. Thank you for witnessing my path from invisibility to identity, from homelessness to wholeness. May you find the courage to write your own story, whatever your starting point.